this is a slide from Basil's identifying researchers presentation earlier on, and it indicates that there's a concept within People Australia that you can actually harvest information not just from National Library sources, but from other OAI repositories, possibly at universities. What our ability to express these statements of identity means is that the data that you could harvest into People Australia is not just data from, say, our open access repositories, but it's actually also data from our corporate record that actually ties things together. So that's, I think, really quite exciting. So what would that enable us to do? Well, one thing it would enable us to do if we could actually get this sort of practice across Australia is that if we were describing a publication in our ePrint system or whatever else, we wouldn't actually be reliant on finding identifiers for authors from within our own university. We actually use services from People Australia to actually identify the People Australia identifier and use that as the metadata. If we were describing a data set, we could do a similar thing. We could actually use the identifiers expressed at a national level to actually classify the work that we were doing. Now that has a if we could actually get that sort of practice happening across the nation, that actually has a really positive effect on the way that we can actually get data back about our researchers into our universities. At the moment, things like publications reporting and other things are terribly time consuming, and one of the reasons for that is that at a publication level or a journal level, identities are incredibly problematic. If we could start harvesting listings of publications and what have you not, based on identifiers that were held in People Australia, we would actually reduce the amount of time it took to collect that information dramatically. So I think that's something to look forward to and something to advocate for. And it isn't just People Australia that has this sort of vision. Another thing that I've been involved in is looking at the possibility of having a national research data collections registry where researchers could go and find, search for data in their particular fields. And one of the really nice things about the registry is it's been influenced by the work of a former NLA person, Judith Pearce, and her ISO 2146 standard. And within that standard, it has the concept that it's not just about the data. We actually need unique identifiers for people and parties and services. So you could see those identifiers again expressing themselves within a national data collections registry. So that's pretty much the content of my talk, the promise of being able to use information from our corporate systems as, I guess, University Calendar 2.0. But there are some problems that we still need to resolve. One is that statements like find an expert are inherently geared to tell a story about universities as they are currently. We haven't yet got a practice of actually archiving that public expression of that information. But because we've got this distinction between separating private to public via policy, really all we need to do is extend our policy to actually cater for that. That's my talk. Thank you.
Simon, thank you. I'm sure there will be questions. I'll try and see them. Yes, right near the front here. Helen, just get you a microphone. What's coming?
Hello, Simon. Helen Livingston from the University of South Australia. My question really isn't about exposing all this data to the world, it's about the bits that people don't want exposed. Everybody here would have examples of authors and researchers who are worried about identity fraud and a whole range of things, or even just missing wives and children, and don't want to be so exposed on the web. What are you going to do about those sorts of things?
Some of that's at the policy level. So we were fortunate to get strong support from very senior people in the university, our DVCR, and they were of the belief that to be a researcher at the University of Melbourne was to in fact have a public responsibility to communicate out who you were and what you were. So as part of being a researcher at the University of Melbourne, there's an implicit expectation that at least part of your job is to be a public figure. It might not be a great part of your job, but you should be be able to be acknowledged as a researcher. So even if we didn't have a Find an Expert consolidated registry of who we were, we would expect you to have to be contactable and have a page. Now we are very careful in that policy layer of looking at the information that we've got. For instance, contact details can be very sensitive. So we had contact details in the HR system, and one of the things that we needed to do before we made them public on Find an Expert was give researchers a mechanism for saying, actually, I don't want my phone number actually being made available publicly, because the work that I'm doing is quite sensitive and I don't want to be contacted by every crazy person out there. On the other hand, we were able to expand the use of our contact details. So if there were people who really wanted to be contacted by the media, they could put their mobile phone number and they can indicate that, yes, they did want that information being communicated out. So it is being very sensitive to those issues, but it's also, if you can drive this from a university level and actually say, well, what do we expect from our academics, then I guess that's probably the way we need to do it.
We have some more questions for Simon. Yes.
Hi Simon, Christine Hill, AUT University, Auckland. To what extent have you tried to, you were using HR records for your name authorities, for your experts database. That may in some cases be different from the authorised name that people are using for their name authorities that are used for other, like Library of Congress, Libraries Australia.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the really interesting research challenges that we've got now, is that because publications reporting was an administrative exercise, we've actually got these publication records where, the name of the publication is fantastic, the ISSN is fantastic, the page numbers are great, but the people identified against them are the names as expressed, or a shortening of the names as expressed in the HR field. One of the things that would be fantastic is if we could actually bring those two worlds together. I think that would be a really, really excellent way of progressing the problem of providing unique identities at a publication journal level. But you're right, it is an existing problem.